Attention. It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be epic. By now, you've heard me talk about Insights EDU in Phoenix, Arizona, February 20 through 22nd. Here's why I think you should join us at the Insights EDU conference. It's one of the few conferences focused on helping schools serve today's online and non-traditional students. If you're concerned at all about where your enrollments are going to come from in 2024 and beyond, and you should be concerned, you need to be at this conference. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50.
Prepare to be astonished.
Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salucio back here on another episode one that I've been waiting a long time for, knowing that my guests were coming on. I've been waiting for this one. Exciting talk. A couple things before we get going. You guys know, if you probably have heard me say it, because I always take an opportunity to promote my own work. Why wouldn't I? It's my podcast. But we wrote a book called Commencement, the beginning of a new era in higher education. It came out this past November of 2022. It sold thousands of copies across the world, and it's based on our first 125 presidents we interviewed on this podcast and everything they had to say about the future of higher education. It's available on Amazon. If you don't want to do that and you don't want to listen to this podcast, you can always catch us in person. We're going to be at a couple of places coming up. We're going to be at the Middle States Commission for Higher Education in December of 2023 in Philadelphia, December 4th through 6th. And then we're going to be at Insights EDU in Phoenix, Arizona, February 20 through 22. I'm going to have all the mics set up. I'm going to be there in person. I'm going to be interviewing guests that are scheduled, and anybody that wants to stop by and get on a mic and talk about what the future holds for the industry that we love. And that's the basis for our conversation today. Why else would you be in higher education if you didn't believe in it? One person that I know believes in it is my guest host today. We got him on a while back. He's won like an Aspen Award-winning prize. He wins things all the time. He runs a very important college devoted to a very important sector of higher education. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is. His name is Manoj Patel, and he is president of Little Priest Tribal College. Manoj, what's going on, man?
Hi, Joe. Nice to see you again, and thanks for having me. It's an incredible honor for me to be in the same group as HLC president and board chair. So I know we are also a HLC peer institution, so we had our accreditation visit. So love to hear from Barbara and Joe. So
just like any Manoj, this is your first time guest co-hosting appearance, and just like all of my other rookie guest co-hosts, you reveal the guest before I have a chance to bring them on. But that's okay. We leave all our mistakes in. It's a good one. Ladies and gentlemen, first to the microphone, she is the president of the Higher Learning Commission. Her name is Dr. Barbara Gelman-Danley. Barbara, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you for coming on. And I'm going to bring in our other guest before I ask you any more questions, since Manoj gave it away. He gave the big reveal away. I'm going to keep talking about that through the entire episode. Ladies and gentlemen, also to the microphone, here she is. Her name is Dr. Joe Alice Blondin. She is president of Clark State College and chair of the Higher Learning Commission Board of Trustees. Joe, how are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing so good. I got so many questions for you guys, and I know our audience loves to hear. What a unique opportunity to have the chair of a board of accreditation body and the president of an accreditation body all here together, to have Manoj make mistakes in front of you. But that's all right. We won't keep doing that to Manoj. Joe, we'll start with you. First of all, take an opportunity to talk to us about Clark State College, and then talk to us about your role as chair of the HLC Board of Trustees.
Okay, so Clark State College is a community one of 23 community colleges in the state of Ohio. We're in Springfield, Ohio, right between Columbus and Dayton. We serve 6,000 students on the credit side of the house, and then what we call quick path or non-credit. Non-credit's a little deficit framing. So we want our students, all our students are students, about 1,000 to 2,000 students a year on in those workforce programs, short-term programs. We also have 3 workforce-focused bachelor's degrees, and we have done that, and I'll talk about it a little bit later, as an innovation in concert with the Higher Learning Commission and the Ohio Department of Higher Education approval process. So that is really innovative. The other area I just wanted to hit is that I am excited to be the chair of the Higher Learning Commission. I have been since 2022. Prior to that, I've served on the Higher Learning Commission board since 2018, and I've been a peer reviewer for prior to that for about 10 years, 16 years. I was also on the Institutional Actions Council. And for those of you who are really ready for the brag, I was on the Assessment Academy design group back in the early 2000s. And so to say that I'm an accreditation nerd is an absolute understatement. And to say that when I was in high school and I said, when I grow up, I want to chair in an accrediting body is the absolute truth. Just wanted to share that with you. And I am a very devoted practitioner of accreditation as innovation. So thank you very much.
Amazing.
See, it was amazing, and I've gone
It
off camera
was.
because the worst thing that can happen is that my Wi-Fi goes out again as one of you are talking. So I went off of camera so that we can maintain the integrity of the conversation. But thank you for that, and I want to go over to you, Barbara. It's the same thing. Higher Learning Commission. Let's just assume for a minute that somebody is listening to a higher education podcast that hasn't heard of the Higher Learning Commission. Let's just assume that for a minute. How would you explain it?
I can't imagine that, but I will answer the question.
Me neither, by the way.
We are accreditors, and what accreditors do, there are different types of accreditors. We look at an entire institution for quality assurance of the strength of the institution, the offerings, teaching and learning, etc. There are 7 institutional accreditors that are similar to HLC, the Higher Learning Commission. We are the largest. We've been around a long time, and since the 1895, and we have close to 1,000 institutions. Since 2020, there are no regional borders, so we are no longer called regional. We have membership across the country and those interested in coming to us. I would say that accreditation is the way that organizations can find themselves, really individuals and organizations like business and industry, seeing that quality approval for what is going on at an institution. And by having accreditation, there is a link to federal financial aid. We can consider ourselves part of what we call the triad: the federal government, the states, and the accreditors. So we're here to tell everybody what you're learning is being done the right way, the institution is strong, and they are accredited by HLC.
Oh, yeah.
Now, Barbara, I'm going to start with you, and then I'm going to move over to Joe, and then I'll pass it to Manoj after that. The role of an accreditor is to make you scared, right? It's to stifle innovation, because no accreditor wants an institution to innovate, right? We're just going to come in and we're going to tell you all the things that you can't do and freak you out while you're there. That's what some people assume happens with accreditation.
I would say that's an 1895 perspective. So let me show you where we are in 2023 forward. The Higher Learning Commission is known for innovation.
Yes.
We try new things all the time. We have strategic plans where we bring in external providers. We get support from such groups as the Lumina Foundation, and our lens is always looking forward. We take time every year at our conference, which is in April of this year, April 13th through 16th in Chicago. We have close to 4,000 people who attend. And what we do is we release the trends that are going on in higher education at the time. I spend substantial time during the year collecting everything, listening to podcasts, reading books, articles, etc. And then we boil it down to 8 pages. Trends are no good unless we act on them. So we use those trends, sit down and have retreats with the board and say, what does this mean for accreditation? The higher education ecosystem sits not just within higher education, but all the stakeholders with whom we participate. As for innovation, we are doing a lot. For one thing, and you might be shocked at this, we are an agile organization. We have a requisite that all our employees get trained and or certified in agile so we can learn how to be more responsive to our institutions and our stakeholders. And recently, we just started a project that absolutely says innovation in the billboard format, and that is a credential lab. And what we're doing,
Surprise.
yes, and we love to surprise people by being out there in front. The credential lab is an opportunity for us, and I'm just going to answer briefly now. You can prod it more as much as you want later on. The credential lab is looking at the kinds of things, for example, that external providers are offering for quality assurance and within our institutions and helping them do training. There are ways to learn that fall outside and within higher education. And so there are over 1,000 credentials offered. And pardon me, let me correct that one. 1 million credentials are out there. And so we're taking a look at all of that for quality assurance, and I'll be delighted to go on and talk more when you're ready.
I'm always ready. But I wanted to serve that up to you because for whatever reason, and it still persists today, there are those within higher education that hear accreditor and actually panic a little bit. And you go, wait a second. Are the accrediting bodies, the Higher Learning Commission is trying to help institutions innovate and survive the headwinds that we're faced with? By the way, it's not just declining 18-year-olds coming to college. It's people who question the value of a college degree in general. It's the narrative around it. It's the only way we can survive as an institution is to innovate. And I'm glad, it's like where did 1980 called and wants their old opinions back. That's not the way we fashion ourselves today. And Joe, I know you could speak to that because you were talking about innovation at your institution. And then Manoj, after Joe talks, I'll forgive you for your mistake, and then you could take over.
Let me start by forgiving Manoj for all of his mistakes. But
I gotta let him in, Joe.
But what I do want to say is absolutely innovation is part of what we do at community colleges. It's always been in our DNA, but seeing that reflected back in our accrediting body, particularly with this credential lab project, in some other ways that we have sought, for example, approval for our workforce focused bachelor's degrees, has been really key. I want to go back for just a second to something Barbara said. So she was talking about the trends that are shared widely across the HLC learning communities. And you, Joe, mentioned the perception of higher education, the value of higher education, and then in particular outcomes in higher education. And all those issues were lifted up to the board. And then many of the college presidents I know, we've then in turn gone to our boards and asked them to rank and deal with those trends as a strategic framework for any change we have on campus. So that's definitely one way that we look to HLC for innovation. But the other is, and you're right, we haven't traditionally thought of accreditation as this opportunity to innovate, but with this massive marketplace of credentials, and do they have value, is a major question. And then how do we reskill people who have been left out of the training opportunities, the educational opportunities, and how do we really achieve equity, which is part of the HLC strategic plan called Evolve. Equity is the first E. And so I think it's really important that any accrediting body, but I'm very proud of the work that HLC does, of course, lifts up those opportunities for the least among us and the folks who have been left out of higher education, because I know that those are the folks that we try to serve as well as possible in community colleges. But HLC does not leave behind all the different missions for its institution. With that in mind, I want to say that another area that the Higher Learning Commission is looking at very seriously and looking to implement is a mission-based accrediting process, or what's called differential accreditation, for a tribal college or for a community college or for a massive state institution like my alma mater, Purdue University. I had to get that in there, or Arizona State, both accredited by HLC. How do we look at not necessarily different standards? We want to ensure quality, but based on the mission, does it make sense? Does a one-size-fits-all approach has never made sense? We've known that at community colleges. We know that in higher education across any type of institution now. So I think that the leadership around that mission focused accreditation is coming from HLC, and that is exciting too.
It's
It's exciting
or
to
at
me.
least it's said a lot. Yeah, it's a lot more said a lot more often. It's not who we exclude in higher ed, it's who we include in higher education. And speaking of including, I'm going to kick it over to my best friend and co-host Manoj Patel.
Thank you, Joe. Hopefully I won't make the same mistake twice. Again, this is an incredible honor to be a co-host and to be talking to our guests. I have a couple of questions. I want to open it to our HLC president. I know we have the annual conference coming up. I've always been attending. I learn a lot. It's called Higher Ground this time, the theme per se. What can you tell the listening audience what we should be expecting in 2024?
We're going to, for one thing, if you look up Higher Learning Commission Trends 2023, we will start with Higher Learning Commission Trends 2024. And as Joe said so well, they are used by our institutions to prioritize your needs and your strategic directions. We'll have excellent speakers in all kinds of areas, including artificial intelligence. That's a really hot topic this year. We have a meeting with presidents, and I'm working on that right now. I think we will talk about both the credential lab, artificial intelligence, and have some good conversations about what the presidents are facing. That is just for presidents, a safe space for around 300 people to talk about what you are dealing with on your campuses. Because we have always between 3,500 and 4,000 people, we cover just about everything you possibly can in higher education, and our attendees are not just from within our membership institutions. It's going to be exciting. It's very vibrant. You might recall the first in-person one we did after COVID. It was like a hug fest. Everybody was so glad to see each other. So I would say from all the learning, the number one thing that takes place is sharing of ideas and networking.
Believe it, before you say anything, Joe, I have a button from a movie where it says, does someone need a hug? And I literally took it out because I was like, I'm not going to play that with these ladies today. And I can't believe Barbara just said it's a hug fest. It would have been perfect.
It is a hug fest.
Can I add just a little bit to that? So it's really easy to forget that at the center of everything that we do, clearly, it was not easy for me to forget, but when we're talking about accreditation, it seems like we're talking about something that's a little bit removed from the student, but students are at the center of everything we do. And one of the other exciting pieces that was rolled out about a year ago, and we keep coming back to it, is the Student Right to Know Guide. We're the only accrediting body that put together a list with a number of thought leaders from across the country, put together all the things that the students need to know, to ask, to be good consumers of higher education. And I think that's also really important, that we're on the student side. This isn't about, I know that when people hear about accreditation, they hear that A, it's voluntary, B, it's about financial aid, C, it's about transfer. Those are the sound bites that you hear that your college president or accreditation liaison shares. But this is about students and making sure that students also have the best possible educational experience that results in a great credential that they can take. It's marketable, it has value, they make a family sustaining wage. I think that the Student Right to Know Guide that was published last year is just another example of how HLC puts students at the center and why I like serving on the board, and that's exciting.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
And I have to add that we update that regularly. And the kinds of topics that are included are everything from what you should ask when you're looking for a program to student mental health and support services for veterans. But I do want to say, I think it's important to note that as an accreditor, we jumped out front and changed our mission and vision. And the board put students in the mission and vision, not just institutions. We put students first.
Right. That was a good sound effect, by the way.
It's hard to put one at the end. That was perfect. Love that.
That's a fact. The young people say.
That's right.
Thank you. That was really helpful to know what's coming up. A follow-up question to the board chair and to the president. We as college presidents are facing a lot of headwinds, political instability, gently said, based on which state you're in. How does HLC think about all these things, what is the advice to the listening audience, especially who are chancellors, the presidents? How should we prepare for all what I call the unrest in higher education?
That's a great question. And that's a question that we've spoken about as a board. When do we weigh in? How do we weigh in? Do we weigh in? And the one area where there is a great deal of, I guess, what I would call elasticity is with the criteria for accreditation. So what HLC is asking its institutions is, how do you meet the criteria for accreditation? We start with that. So how do you meet them? What is your institution doing? And I think that we also understand that every institution operates within a political environment. That's an assumption that we all make, but we also are not going to weigh in. I don't see our role as weighing in on the political environment of a state at any given time. A, that's not productive. B, that ignores the fact I think there's guidance around with the liaisons and with the board around how to work through some of these issues. But a good example right now is in Ohio, Senate Bill 83 is an excellent example that we're working through. And I think really HLC has not weighed in on this. This is very clear that HLC has not written a letter to the legislature or the governor or the sponsor of the bill. What HLC has or hasn't said, but I think that the understanding is that each institution is going to address the concerns around this bill within their institution and with their legislators. Clark State, for example, we see value in an opportunity in how we're going to address those concerns. And so I think that HLC is not a monolith of opinion. We represent so many diverse institutions that I believe it would be a mistake for us to weigh in on every single situation within what has traditionally been our 19-state region. Now, that being said, that does not mean that we are unaware of any kind of situation that could threaten the quality of learning. The quality of learning is paramount. And whatever we need, if there were a situation I think that's an area where HLC would certainly weigh in. But as far as institutions and in the political environment in which they operate, I think there's guidance, but there are no mandates. Barbara, do you want to kind of?
Yeah, I mean,
take that one?
I think this is a key role of accreditation. There's a lot of things institutions, Minaj, and others want to do on their own, but they need the accreditor to come in and say, you should do that. And that can help presidents and that can help other people on campus to remember what's important. When it comes to the very sensitive political issues within the states, keep in mind that our institutions are public and private. So much of that impacts
And different missions.
Right, exactly. So we go tribal colleges, community colleges, specialized, just offering law, research universities, etc. But what we do is we provide counsel. We're quite the listening ear. We're very accessible. We did a study recently where our liaisons who work with the institutions have a high 90% approval rate for how much they're available. And I talk to presidents all the time. And when I talk to them, I'm not sitting there taking notes to say, we will hold this against you or create a fear. I'm giving them an opportunity to talk it through and think it through. But we recognize that when it comes to state issues, it's the presidents of the institutions who should be talking, and we don't want to step on their toes.
Tell them like it is.
Yep.
Or the governance aspect of it. I have a board of trustees, as you do, Manoj, that we answer to, and our board also is very directional. Governance is a part of the criteria for accreditation too, but we want to make sure too that we're representing, particularly for community college, the communities that we serve as well. And so I think that there are a lot of complications when one answer would be delivered by an entity as influential as the Higher Learning Commission. I think HLC is very sensitive to institutional mission and statewide political situations.
Yeah, and we actually have great faith in the higher education values. So even in those areas where DEI and other things are being challenged, we ask the institutions, will you be able to show that you are still doing these things according to your mission? And they say, absolutely. They will find a way. They will prevail.
True.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. For a third straight year, the EdUp Experience will be recording live at Illusion Live 2024 this year in San Antonio, Texas, April 7th through the 10th. Illuminate, innovate, and inspire. That's the framework for the conference. Leaders from institutions around the world will converge at Illusion Live 2024 to discover game-changing technology, share industry insights, and build powerful connections. It's time to explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. You can register now at elive.illusion.com.
Epic.
Oh, yeah.
You've heard me talk about the Insights EDU conference. Well, let me tell you 3 reasons why I think everyone listening should join us in Phoenix, Arizona on February 20 through 22nd for Insights EDU. 1, it's one of the few conferences focused on helping schools serve today's online and non-traditional students. 2, you can expect a mix of speakers you won't hear anywhere else, including higher ed leaders from Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, and more. And reason 3, Insights EDU has an agenda packed with sessions discussing the latest trends in higher ed leadership, marketing, and enrollment management. Register now at insightsedu.com and use promo code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.
Oh, yeah.
When we get down to shift a little bit, and we want to get back to the innovation conversation, Barbara, there were a couple folks that I know of, actually a couple that have been on the podcast. If you go back to maybe 2019 or 2020, there was an HLC innovation document. I can't remember the exact title, but it was like Joe Levy and Mark Milliron and a bunch of other authors put together like a guide for innovation. It's amazing.
Partners for Transformation.
It's so refreshing to see a document like that being a way forward for institutions as we innovate. And some of the innovations that have come up lately, institutions are looking at different academic calendars, right? You say that's an innovation, but it's really hard to get to something like that if you've been doing something one way for a long time and you shift. It really takes a mindset shift. We did see another accrediting body approve a 90 or 96 credit baccalaureate degree. And I know that is something the HLC has been considering because a bunch of the presidents who are involved in and around having that conversation with you in HLC have been on the podcast going, we're talking about that with HLC. Where are you all at with that? I don't want to call it a watershed moment, but consideration for the future.
Yeah, I can answer that and tell you we've gotten very few requests to do that. Okay. The 3-year degree can be anything from packaging a degree so you earn it in 3 years with 120 credit hours to what the Northwest group did, the commission, which is a 90 credit degree. And recently, Sunny Ramaswamy gave us an excellent explanation of what they did. They took 3 years. They went through every state. They analyzed the states. They analyzed federal government, several agencies to see if it were possible and how to go about this. If we were to get into this arena, we would need to do the same. We would need to find out what the rules are everywhere, because certainly such things as a credit hour are locked into higher education legislation, and there's not a lot we can do about it, which we could. It's not a very forward-thinking way of packaging higher education in 2023, but if we get calls and if there is interest expressed, we will study it, and it will take some time. We will do it in an agile way, but it'll take some time because we're going to have to go through all the regulatory things before we can even talk about it at HLC, because there are many. Joe, you want to
and you have to, and Joe's going to jump in, but you'll have to shift your infrastructure to ensure the assessment of all of the research that you do to see that if you can do it. So
we'll find that out. Yeah, we'll find that out when the time comes. But as I said, we are not getting barraged by calls for this.
I'm totally chomping at the bit to talk about this because this is my favorite area of higher education discussion. So we've had talks of competency-based education for many years, and some of us do it better than others, problem-based learning, all those prior learning assessment. We've done those things, and they really haven't moved the needle the way that we wish they would. I always say this, or I've said this for many years on campus. If I just bought a new car, and if I went to the Toyota dealership and I said, I'm ready to buy a car, and they said, you can buy a car August 15th, you can buy a car January 15th, or you can buy a car June 1st, I'd never buy a car, because those are the only days. It is outrageous. And so we're selling a product that really should be on a continuous loop, just like anything else, right? We should be able to produce a lot of the learning that students need for marketplace credentials anytime. And so we know that, but yes, the credit hour is the biggest infrastructure challenge in higher education. And the future of higher education is unbundling all that. We've known that for many years. We're not all looking forward. Clark State is looking forward to short-term Pell because that will be the opportunity for the shift in this credit hour. Short-term Pell is, and that challenges a lot of other institutions because they're afraid of their basically it's their financial and their physical infrastructure that will be called into question. But community colleges are, for the most part, ready for this shift and are very much in favor of that. But that is the future of higher education, is a long-term subscription model of continuous learning. It is not a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree or even a 1-year certificate. It is a continuous loop, and that's the future. And a few years ago, HLC had Arthur Levine as the keynote speaker. He also spoke to the Board of Trustees. And I think one of the lessons that I took away from that, and having read his book, is that there's a lot of magical thinking around this just semester infrastructure, and there's a great deal of complacency and kind of institutional exceptionalism around it as well. So I think that we all need to take a step back, even though we're in it. And that's the challenge, is that we're in it. It's the way we're funded at the federal level. And I know it's in every state. I've been in Arkansas, Arizona, and Ohio, and that's how we're funded. But we've got to challenge and do some pilots around a different way of funding this thing.
Learning is always faster with the right tools.
Pass it to you quick, but I just comment and then I'll pass it to you. The limitation of the credit hour is a severe limitation. And so there's only so much you can do around it, but there are things that you can do around it. And to your point, Joe, it's the reason that when you watch a Netflix show, you skip over the opening credits. Because we value speed. It's why if Amazon said your package is going to take 7 days, you would order it somewhere else. If we consider that speed is an ingrained factor in how we think, we have to figure out how to speed it up with the foundations with the limitations that we have. And it is possible to do that. But to Barbara's point, that research of what the future really holds can happen simultaneously. But for many institutions, they can grow if they take the innovation that they're allowed and make it happen.
So that's where the credential lab comes in. The whole idea of the credential lab is that within and outside of higher education, there are bits and pieces that you can get that could or might not eventually lead toward a degree. That's a recognition that there are certificates that a lot of learners would appreciate because it could lead directly to workforce and lifestyle improvements. And it's pretty obvious that if somebody succeeds and has a certificate on the wall, then they can say, I got that. Let me go on. Let me stack it. Let me continue. Let me go to community college or universities. We are doing that where we're looking at the quality of the organizations externally. It'll be voluntary, not accreditation, not tethered by these other things we've talked about. And it will be a matter of an endorsement for those companies that want to come to us. And the key thing for us is also to help our institutions now know how to take these bites that could lead toward a degree, and maybe more than one degree, or maybe come back as an adult learner. So we're really on top of it. And we have to do pilots, and we have to lead them to success, because we don't want failures. And we also, because we're an agile organization, we recognize as an accreditor that failure does not mean it's wrong or bad. Right. You can't innovate without failure. So we don't want to be punitive when we try things with our institutions. We want to give them an opportunity to find success.
I hear that.
There's one thing I know, it's failure. If you ever listen to no, I'm just kidding. The EdUp Experience podcast was a huge failure when we started out. We had no idea what we were doing. Manoj, over to you, because you do know what you're doing.
It's been fascinating so far to listen to the leaders of the future of education. I want to, Barbara, last year I had at the annual conference, there was a presentation regarding Carnegie classification.
Yes.
I don't think so. I think I've listened to that 2 or 3 times as a peer reviewer. Oh, by the way, I don't know if I told you this, but I'm also an HLC peer reviewer.
Yes.
Been visiting campuses and learning a lot. So coming back to the question on Carnegie classification, as a tribal college president, I know this is just a huge honor to be a tribal college president at the same time. What do you think our listening audience should know about Carnegie classification in general, and any details you may want to add on to it?
Yeah, there's a lot changing. Thank you for that question. I recently was at a meeting of CREC, the regional accreditors. We kept the name regional. And Ted Mitchell, who is heading up this project from American Council on Ed and with the Carnegie Foundation, talked about the progress. But traditionally, the Carnegie classifications have been size and type of institution, research, etc. So it can be seen as a regional, it could be research 1, meaning you're one of the large institutions that's trying to cure cancer and doing all kinds of research. It can be research 2. You're doing some, but that's not your primary thing. You're doing all kinds of other arrangements. It could be master's level, bachelor's level, etc. Last year's presentation talked about a parallel system. In effect, they're going to uproot and change the entire system. I think you need to talk to the people who are running that so I don't misrepresent it. But yes, it includes social and economic mobility as part of it, but it's also a very different way of looking at the system. So I would say stay tuned on that. It won't be too long to hear a draft of what's being planned.
That is amazing.
I want some sound effects in my life now.
100.
I mean, some intentional sound effects.
Huh? All right, you get a good setup for that one. Go ahead, Manoj.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara, for informing us about Carnegie classification. The next question I want to tag along with the board chair here is, and I think I want you both to respond to, is about the strategic plan you guys have at the HLC. I believe it's called Evolve. I've read a few times. I've shared that with my board of trustees here as well. Again, the listening audience would like to know, what is it and how long it's for, and what are things they should be aware of?
Barbara, I'll start out from a board perspective just to talk a little bit about Evolve. So it's the second strategic plan, second iteration of a strategic plan that Barbara has done since she's become the president and CEO of the Higher Learning Commission. But Evolve we've got a really neat board structure, and we have a committee on strategy. Okay. And if you don't have a committee on strategy, college presidents on your board, that a lot of people have a kind of a traditional, we've got an academic affairs committee. Really?
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, exactly. Are you kidding me? I don't know if you need an academic affairs committee, but you definitely need a committee that's strategically focused on what matters most to students and programs and the industry. And so I think that's what this committee on strategy really represents for the board. It is the directions that we need to go, in particular, the equity, the vision that we need to have as we change as an accrediting body. That's a pretty innovative thought in and of itself, that an accrediting body wants to change. So I think, and Barbara, I teed it up for you, but I'll hand it to you. But that's the way that the board sees it. And we regularly get updates and follow that in our board meeting and practice. And Jackie Elliott, who has been on your show, Jackie, who's president at Central Arizona, she is the chair of the Committee on Strategy. So it's in good hands of Jackie Elliott.
Jackie's all fire.
She is. Barbara, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, the nice thing about this, and that was a great setup, I appreciate it, is that it's a members plan, because we start with surveys and listening sessions. The plan is good through 2025, but that's a moving target as to when in 2025. It could be December, it could be fall. We'll see how that goes. but we have member input substantially. We use these trends that I mentioned. That's critically important. We do an internal analysis, and then we come up with the key areas. And I don't know if any of you saw the movie It's a Beautiful Mind, but when I took all the findings, the surveys and everything, it was almost like I was seeing a code, and the letters came out. And the letters were E for equity, V for vision, O for outcomes, L for leadership, V for value, and E for engagement. So in evolve. And we think it's important. I would tell anybody, get an acronym. It makes it easier. All our members recognize the term evolve. We report on it all the time. We have key performance indicators. We act on it. All good strategic plans. We have space to move away a little bit when something new happens in the higher ed world that we have to respond to, or accreditation world. So it is a roadmap. And I'm evaluated on it. Our staff are evaluated on it. So it's not sitting on a shelf. I've seen far too many institutions or organizations or businesses. They spend all this money. They do a beautiful strategic plan, and nobody knows what it is or uses it. That is not the case at HLC.
Wow. Such good stuff, you guys. And one of the things that we hear a lot here on the podcast, depending on if you want to believe that everything that we hear is recorded, because there's always there's before the record button gets hit. And sometimes things come out that I will never divulge because I have the trust of my guest, where sometimes we paint rosier pictures than the truth is. And HLC and other accrediting bodies, typically when you think about assessment, you think about learning, you think about students, you think about all of those parts of the student and the student experience, faculty, and so on. There has been equal, I would think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Barbara, but there's been, and Joe, as much attention paid to the financial sustainability of colleges. We've seen a lot of colleges close, a lot that are upside down, maybe not without a direct path forward. There's been, if you go back to the for-profit sector, which I worked in for 15 years, there were teach-out agreements that had to be added because as an accrediting body, and I'm making assumptions here, you wanted some assurances that if this school failed, the students were taken care of. If you run your institution poorly, you know what? That's bad decision-making, but the students should be held harmless from that decision-making. Is the financial health of institutions discussed at a high level as something to pay attention to?
Constantly.
Constantly.
Yeah. Joe, you go. All right, I'll go ahead and then you. All right, quickly. Yes, it's the number one thing that we're seeing. We're seeing critical problems. We're looking at what metrics we should have in place to see it coming. It's absolutely important. And we even created a teach out toolkit, which is on our website. Right. We see the good, the bad, and the ugly. We see more of this all the time, and we're totally on top of it. Joe?
And HLC has a few tools in its toolbox to notify the public, because that is part of our role, is the quality assurance part of this and that public trust. And we have a designation, financial designation that can let the public know that HLC is aware of the situation. So just as a boots on the ground comment as a college president, the higher education emergency relief fund money, or HERF, was awash there for a while, and it hid some of the financial situations of colleges. And our board has had some very pointed discussions about, when HERF goes away, what does that look like? And we had those discussions 2-3 years ago. We didn't have them just at the June board meeting of 2023. So I think that we're all aware of the financial, and that's part of any evaluation. And Barbara, I don't have the exact statistic, but I would say that just about every institution that comes before the board for any kind of sanction or notice, etc., it's often financial. It's often financial. And at several institutions, and I do say this not because I'm a trained English professor, but the faculty and students at an institution are not what run an institution down. They're not. The faculty and students and staff do not. It is leadership, it is board governance, and it's leadership. And it's financial oversight by the CFO, the president, and the board. and the chief academic officer. These are all important. This is important to know, because one thing that I'm absolutely a champion of is making sure that those, as you just said, Joe, who are held harmless, and the students need to be. But I think that HLC takes its fiduciary oversight role very seriously. And in fact, in 2018, we had a presentation, and have had several since, by Rick Beyer, who would be great. Maybe you've had. Okay, yeah, he's fantastic and a real leader in this area of board governance and mergers, etc. And he spoke with us very broadly at first, and then through subsequent meetings more specifically, about what the mergers and acquisitions landscape is going to look like in higher education and how we need to be prepared. And in fact, Don Elliman, who is the chair of our board finance committee, and Mike Suring, who is our CFO at HLC, they're both constantly presenting to the board about what this means for the future of institutions, our finances as a board, and how we can keep reinvesting to make sure that the public is not just informed, but also that we're guiding institutions to do the right thing.
Yeah, and I would say what you're saying, Joe, is ideal and doesn't happen at every campus. There are those presidents who want to try to fix it before they tell the board, and then by the time they tell the board, unfortunately, it's too late.
Yeah, and I know I've said this because I've had so many conversations, and schools upside down, right side up, and the accrediting body, HLC, has absolutely no. Now, let's assume that this institution has quality learning and assessment. The HLC has no interest in having a school closed. That's not good for anybody.
Not at all.
Anything like mentorship, or do you match up good performing colleges with bad, or do you do anything to prevent that?
We have academies, we have liaisons, and I'll start with the liaisons. They get excellent counsel from the liaisons who will often recommend others that they should talk to, or organizations that might help them with consulting, et cetera, or individuals. But we run academies, and we address these issues specifically in the academies as to what folks should be looking for. And that's why we published the Teach Out Toolkit, which was the first of its kind. And it just step by step what you need to think about ahead of time. And we're constantly renewing those. I get calls from presidents frequently, and the first thing I say is focus, because I remember one coming to me and he had 7 ideas to fix his institution. He was all excited. As a former college president, I said, I have a suggestion for you. Focus, pick one. And that's the same thing as it ties to the credential lab. They can get into partnerships with external providers because they think it's a fix. It could be, and they could find out later on that turned out to be a very bad arrangement. So we see it all over the map.
I want to make a comment as a peer reviewer. One of the things we see is there is criterion 1 to 5. 2 is something people nowadays are looking into. I look into 2 very seriously. Even though I'm mainly in criterion 3 and co-lead in 5, I see issues happening in criterion 2 lately, which is basically integrity, board issues, board integrity. Yes. And you made a comment on the chat box about disengaged boards and painting a rosy picture and not sharing the truth. I see that. And then there's a disconnect between teaching and learning and the budgeting. So that's why I feel the criterion 1 through 5 and those 18 core components cover they're so nicely covers all the pillars of the higher education, and doesn't matter what institution, they cover everything. So that's why I'm a firm believer in a criterion of accreditation.
And Manoj, I think that's what I meant earlier when I said the elasticity of them, because they need to apply to your institution. My institution and your institution may meet part of our mission a little bit differently. However, I totally agree with you. And it doesn't surprise me that the criterion, I also write on, when I wrote, I'm not a peer reviewer anymore, I write on 2 and 5. And the issues that they're related, obviously, they're all interconnected, but I can see 2 coming up. And I have seen, with all due respect, a lot of inexperienced people being elevated to the presidency, who may not understand board governance, and then also individuals who are put on boards who don't understand a policy governance model, particularly at a public institution. And I'm not speaking about mine at all, but I do think that there's a lot of room, and HLC is a good mentoring community for best practices in those areas. But I couldn't agree with you more and we're going to see more of that. And we need to be, and you're an Aspen fellow, which is awesome. And I think that Aspen has done a lot of work. We need 300 Aspens to fill these. I retire in 2 years. We need, I didn't mean to announce that. Yeah, surprise everyone. But I think that we need to fill these roles with people who are as thoughtful as you are about accreditation and what that means. Last thing I'll say about that is, so those 5 criteria, people think it's an add-on. They think, I've heard presidents say to me when I was a faculty member or a CAO, they said, oh, this is an extra, just get someone to write it and we're done. And I want, yes. And I want everything to matter. I want everything that I do to line up and matter. And why not? If you can comply, or you can make it something innovative and foundational to your college. And so it sounds like you do that too, Manoj. So I appreciate you saying that about the criteria. And they're about to be edited as well. We're going through that process as a board. We're talking about it, in fact, at this board meeting. Barbara, you had a story you wanted to tell.
Yeah, I just want to say quickly, I was in a hearing one time and the institution had enormous problems all over the place. And they had hired a new president. One of the board members said, there's a new sheriff in town, everything's going to be okay. He had earlier introduced himself as having been on that board for 28 years. Imagine what it felt like to hear him say there's a new sheriff in town. And that's a totally disengaged board.
Yikes! We, in the interest of time, I want to just make sure we're okay on time. I have one final question for you both, and I'll start with Barbara on this one. What do you see for the future of higher education? And add in anything else at all you want to say about HLC.
I think the future of higher education will still have American higher education as a leader in the world. We have to adapt. We have to be very adaptive. One of the agile things is it's adaptive approach versus just following what might happen down the road, but totally adjusting as you go along, and HLC will mirror that.
Joe, same question to you. What do you see for the future of higher education? Anything else you want to say about HLC or Clark State College?
I see a totally subscription distributed model as we move into the future. There will be people taking advantage of higher education who've never seen themselves in higher education. We'll be training for jobs we don't know what they are yet. And we will be there will be no more semesters. There will be no more credit hour. There will be skills, and businesses will subscribe to this specific model. At the same time, there will also be traditional higher education, and that gives people more choices in the future. And then I would also just say that I would like I want to make sure that I have as many sound effects moving forward for any of my faculty and staff Senate meetings, as well as for my board meetings. They're already enjoyable, but I think that would make them a little bit more, that would give them a little flair. And we need just a little more flair in higher education.
That's right.
There are some at Staples, but you probably don't want to use those.
I haven't been to Staples in 30 years.
Well, I would ask Manoj what he thinks the future of higher education holds, but because of the mistake earlier in the episode, we're not going to. No, I've already asked him. He was a guest on this podcast already. Okay. I would not do that to him. Manoj, what did you think of this, your first co-hosting gig here on EdUp?
I couldn't be more. I'm incredibly honored to be. This is my co-host for the first time, and to have somebody like HLC president and HLC board chair, which I have been in higher ed for 21 years, and I have been a HLC in all levels, from faculty onwards, for this to happen. So thanks for giving me this privilege. It's an absolute honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today, Dr. Barbara Gelman-Danley. She is the president of the Higher Learning Commission, and Dr. Joe Blondin. She is the president of Clark State College and the chair of the board at HLC. Ladies, did you have a good time today as we talked about higher ed?
Probably the best time I'll have all day.
Yeah, me too. It was absolutely the highlight.
I'll take it.
And I had a
With
good
that-
breakfast. I had a great breakfast, but this was the highlight.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.
Attention.
It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2024, April 7th through 10th in San Antonio, Texas. Illuminate, innovate, inspire, explore higher education's greatest opportunities with future-ready ideas, solutions, and best practices designed to drive transformation. Register now at elive.ellucian.com. This conference is going to be
Epic.
Hey there, higher ed leaders. Are you thinking about joining the EdUp Experience podcast at Insights EDU on February 20th through 22nd in Phoenix, Arizona?
100%.
I thought so. This is the go-to event for higher education marketing and enrollment management. At Insights EDU, you'll gain cutting-edge insights from industry experts, including speakers from companies like Google, LinkedIn, Adobe, Salesforce, and more. Become the transformational leader your campus needs by participating in discussions on important topics like online student demands and preferences, increasing affordability and accessibility, branding, measuring marketing performance, and much more. Insights EDU is the conference you need to attend in 2024. Register now at insightsedu.com and use the code EdUp to save $50 off your registration.